Hello everyone, welcome to today's episode of the Osasu Show. The increase in gender-based violence cases during lockdown, labeled the shadow pandemic by the United Nations, posed a threat to the lives and livelihoods of women and girls in Africa's largest economy. Nigeria has long been facing a gender-based violence crisis, with 30% of women and girls aged 15 to 49 having experienced sexual violent abuses. Lack of coordination among key stakeholders and poor implementation of legal frameworks, combined with entrenched gender discriminatory norms, has hampered government and civil society efforts to address gender-based violence. On this episode of the Osasu Show, we take a look at curbing the continuous spate of gender-based violence in Nigeria. Don't go anywhere, it promises to be an intellectually engaging conversation.
My son has always dreamt of being in the spotlight. As his mother, it is my duty to help him live up to his dream. That's why I give him Born Vita every day, which contains iron, zinc, and vitamin C that supports his immunity and gives him the strength to pursue his dreams. Born Vita, strength to dream.
North to South Africa, East to West Africa, TOS TV Network is your digital-first Pan-African news network, bringing you news from across the continent. Visit our website www.tostvnetwork.com and follow us on social media at TOS TV Network on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
We live in a society in which violence is a rite of passage for women and girls in Nigeria. That there is no way you would grow up in this country as a girl before the age of 18, and that you wouldn't suffer violence. That's a reality. And so for me, I think that is the hardest part for me, and that the fact that we have to tell these stories to get people to care. Why should we have to share horror stories of 6-month-old babies being raped? Or young girls being raped by teachers? Or a girl who just wanted an education and her home was too loud, so she went to church to study. And she was raped and beaten, and she died from those injuries.
From late May to early June in 2020, several civil society organizations in the country took to the streets to protest the rape and murders of Uwa Omozua, who was raped in a church in Benin and died as a result of the brutal attack. Barakat Bello, who was raped and killed in her home, and Grace Oshiagu, who was raped and killed in Ibadan, the Oyo State capital. In response, the police intensified efforts to catch the perpetrators, showing the power of social movements in addressing violence against women. Nigeria is failing its women and girls in so many ways. The latest spate of violence across the country since the COVID-19 lockdown has underscored the critical need for government to act swiftly to protect its most vulnerable and put an end to gender-based violence.
Women kind of grew more dependent on their abusers because of COVID and because of the lockdown. So before, maybe they were able to go to work. Some of them started working remotely. Maybe they had businesses. Some of them had to stay at home. So they were dependent on their abusers, and that kind of increased the rate of their abuse, and it's reduced their access to help. Also, girls that probably at school as a means of escape from their abusers were stuck at home with maybe their uncles or whoever was abusing them. There was no way they could tell their teacher, because probably when they were in school, they would have been able to tell like someone in school that this is what is going on with me. But during the lockdown, they were stuck at home.
One other thing that we saw was a growth in the audacity, or the audaciousness that a lot of women had. There were actually a lot of, there was a lot of shame affiliated with coming out and coming forward to come and discuss, what was wrong with you, because it had sort of been affiliated with women's issues. And because of that, a lot of people just didn't feel that, that should be one of the things that you should come out and discuss. A lot of people will probably pull you back and let you know that this is not something that you should say, because it can have adverse effects in your future. It can have adverse effects on your family and most of the people who are, close to you. So that was probably one of the issues that I think that we struggled with for, a really long time. And I'm really happy that that's one of the things that we've sort of broken the boundaries and some of the walls around.
One of the things I think that also caused an increment, like a spike in the rate of abuse, was that there was a lot of frustration in the land. People who would have otherwise found other means of venting, other means of, kind of warding off whatever their depressions or whatever their frustrations were, didn't quite have those outlets. There were no recreational facilities, there were no opportunities to even go to their worship places the way they would have, and a few other things. So I think all of that, because these abuses we are talking about are not just sexual. Some of them manifested in some other ways, especially around, having even women perpetrators abuse children within their care. So there was a heightened frustration that was occasioned by all of the all of the restrictions that COVID-19 pandemic occasioned. So that's actually one of the reasons why we had, the SGBV pandemic within that pandemic. And again, I think that, as had been said about responders, having access to first responders, as it were, one of the things I saw was that we don't quite have, an active digital platform on which one could access some of these services. So because that wasn't quite happening, a lot more people didn't know who to reach out to. And then in cases where there were imminent threats, people could have complained. The victims or the possible victims could have, raised alarm, which possibly would have saved them. But because we didn't have any, we didn't have seriously accessible and active digital platforms with which we could reach maybe the police, reach other first responders, they didn't know who to talk to until whatever abuse it was happened to them.
From the camps of internally displaced persons to states across the Federation, it is the same story. Women and girls have been victims of gruesome attacks. The Nigerian police recently stated that it received 717 reported cases of rape between January and May 2020, adding that the current COVID-19 pandemic has led to increased levels of violence against women and girls. This does not account for the number of survivors who choose to stay silent, afraid of the perpetrators, and even more terrified of a society where rape culture and victim blaming is rife today. Intense pressure from civil society groups have also compelled the federal government to declare a state of emergency on gender-based violence in the country.
I don't think enough is being done. We are mostly a people who respond at the peak of an issue, and something else happens and we seem to divert attention, and then that is left to, it appears as if it has abated when in fact it hasn't. Yes, it was very commendable that that state of emergency was declared against SGBV. But just at the peak of trying to galvanize some sort of, deliberate program, response program to tackle it, we had the NSAS, protests that erupted across the nation. And that seemed to distract focus from this. And I speak particularly because I am a member of one of the committees that was set up, an interministerial committee that was set up to respond to that. Not much has happened from since after then. It just appears like we are now trying to reconvene and then restart the conversation and then see how we respond going forward. But I think that it's necessary that going forward, when there are issues, especially issues like this, which not only threaten the protection, the lives of citizens, but also translates even to impacting on the economics of the country. Whatever strategies are formulated or proposed should be followed through and not be allowed to fall within the cracks, really.
At least I know with, the security agencies and the police, which is supposed to be one of the major enforcement agents, there was 0.03 budget allocation for issues of violence against women and girls in all its forms. And also with NAPTIP, that was supposed to be the #1 administration agency on issues of violence against women and girls. Again, there was probably 0.03, allocation of direct line budgeting or tangential line budgets to those issues. So if we don't have those kinds of considerations within the legal frameworks, can we really say that we're serious about addressing the issues? Is actually one of the major things that we had to take a step back to look at. And gender responsive budgeting is a very big issue that actually, for us, interprets the commitment of government to addressing some of the issues of gender gaps and gender responsiveness. So that's actually one thing that I really want to hammer on, and for us to be able to look at constructively and strategically about how do we prevent and protect women and girls and even boys from these issues.
All right, so I like what she said, and I'm going to come in from the implementation and the monitoring part. So like she mentioned, the state of emergency GBV, I think it only happened because a group of CSOs raised awareness on the state of emergency, like the shadow pandemic. There was a protest then. I went there. There was a protest then, and that was when the state declared the state of emergency GBV. So I think the legislature, or let me say, the arms of the government are so good at putting up a show, to be honest. So they domesticate these laws, but what is next, like the implementation process? When the laws are being implemented, or when the projects and programs are being implemented, how have they been monitored? Now, the states that have the VAP Act adopted, how is the services in the sexual assault referral centers? Because this is where survivors go to when they need help. What is the quality of the services that they are getting there? She mentioned the report GBV, which is by the Ministry of Women's Affairs. What you see there mostly is data. And I am more interested in the qualitative aspect of the care or the service survivors are getting than the quantitative aspect, because these data are individuals. How helpful is the help they are getting? And not just that, it's not just about implementing these laws. It's also about what do we do for survivors after they have gotten psychosocial support? Where do they go to? Do we have enough shelters in Nigeria? When a survivor goes to a sexual assault referral center where the VAP Act has been adopted and they are given psychosocial support, are they supposed to still go back to the people who are abusing and raping them? So how many shelters do we have in Nigeria that actually provided for survivors? How much is the government putting into economic empowerment of survivors? It's not just to teach survivors how to make soap or knit. It's actually to give them something that is going to sustain them. Because when you can actually, when you can give women economic empowerment to an extent, it helps them to be independent from their abusers. I'm also going to come in from the aspect of prosecution. Since the sex offenders list was put up in 2019 by NAPTIP, out of 600 cases that were reported, only 38 cases have been convicted. And we know that like rape happens in Nigeria almost every day, like almost every day. So if only 38 cases have been prosecuted since 2019, what are we saying? We are saying that perpetrators can do whatever they want to do and get away with it. Like, look at it, the Supreme Court is on strike right now. How is a survivor going to get access to justice right now? So I don't think the government is doing enough.
This year marks the 26th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, the most visionary agenda for advancing women's rights everywhere, of which Nigeria is a signatory. The COVID-19 pandemic has overshadowed what should have been a year of reflection on the progress made and strengthening on concrete actions to address urgent issues such as gender-based violence. However, the government has to do a lot more to curb gender-based violence in the country by taking decisive actions through appropriate legislation and strengthening of agencies that handle gender-based violence cases, especially law enforcement, social and welfare services.
I'm not happy with the way the Nigerian government is handling issues of violence against women and girls. Rape is just one factor of it. But in general, when we're talking about violence against women and girls, I really don't believe that the Nigerian government is prioritizing it. You know, and what happened is that this entire pandemic and COVID has revealed that, you know, they don't take it seriously. Because one of the things that we have been screaming about from the beginning of the pandemic is to say that you need to make sexual and gender-based violence an essential service. You need to prove that this matters. And for a country like Nigeria, where when we look at the data that we have, the little data that we have, and you look at the Nigerian Demographic and Household Survey, what you see is that between 2013 and 2018, that violence actually increased.
As a legislature, all we can really do is probe the budget. Probe the budget, probe the efficiency and effectiveness of the budget, the efficacy of the budget, but we can't actually add budget lines, And so within the MDAs, we need to be able to get from them a rationale, but also you want to be considerate of the fact that that's one issue that can be holding off the entire budgeting process. So these are some of the things that we're also appealing, to MDAs to be able to look at from a more critical perspective. How is it that a country such as this has 0.03 allocation of the budget within the police architecture, where we have desks, gender desks in every police station, but we don't have response mechanisms for them to be able to reach out to victims of abuse?
Not all police stations in the whole of the Federation can boast of a standard gender desk, but that is the ultimate goal. That is the ultimate ambition. But I can tell you that well over 80% of the stations and 100% of the state CIDs and 100% of the state command headquarters has got these facilities. And for us, this is a good that is substantial progress, looking at where we are coming from and where we want to go.
We all believe that justice delayed is justice denied. And one of the reasons why justice is delayed is because our courts, the dockets are cramped to the full. Like cases are adjourned for more than 2 weeks intervals and the rest of it. And the matter that should ordinarily be dispensed with within weeks now drags for long months. It can weary the heart. It can weary even the strong. So we need to fund our courts adequately. We need to. We cannot say too much about the need to provide and adequately fund sexual assault referral centers. It is totally important.
I want us all to remember how much effort the government put into responding to COVID-19. You said the number of isolation centers that were put up. Isolation centers are just as important as shelters for survivors. So if the government could respond to COVID-19 the way they responded, that means that they can immerse the same effort, the same commitment into responding to sexual and gender-based violence. So there has to be that commitment from the government, and not just the commitment, the processes that are involved in implementing, not just like coming up with these laws. The processes that are involved in implementing these laws have to be inclusive of women, inclusive of people living with disabilities, and inclusive of adolescents, because it's young girls that are actually at most risk of sexual and gender-based violence. Also, people living with disabilities, they are also at like most risk of sexual and gender-based violence. So all this process of implementing, because there's this thing that says like there's nothing for us without us. So whatever you are going to be doing for people, you don't know how much it is hurting them. You don't know how you can like help them as much as they know. They are like the experts in treating whatever is like going on with them, in knowing how to do whatever is going on with them. So this implementation processes has to be inclusive. It has to be, like she said, gender responsive. Like whatever they are doing, like you go to some government spaces and what you see is like most of them are men, like there are not many women. So the government has to see the importance of gender equality and inclusiveness in the implementation process. Also, monitoring process, it's very important. It's not just to implement, you have to monitor so you can know how to improve what you are doing, so you can know the loopholes. So there has to be monitoring process. One of the things I thought about is like about monitoring processes, like for example, those SAC centers, the sexual assault referral centers, let an agent from NAPTIP go there one day, like out of the blue, without them knowing that someone is coming. That is how you can actually monitor something like that. You can, I don't know if this is good, but you can even pretend to be a survivor and see how they would respond to you. That is how you can monitor how they're actually doing these things. Another thing is to actually create a digital platform where survivors that have received services or have received help can write or can talk about the experience, the kind of service that they got, so you can get like first-hand information from survivors themselves. Because people can say they are doing these things, why that is not what the survivors are actually getting.
We all have a role to play. Our parents have got roles to play. Our teachers in school, our religious leaders, and our political leaders. And so the entire socialization process should be activated to play a role. And then the media has got a role to play. As a matter of fact, I've also seen rape victims who say part of the reason why they don't want to report is because of the way these things are usually reported in the media. So for me, we must work together, push together, and together, I believe, we will surmount this rising challenge of rape within our polity.
That's it for today's episode. You can watch all other episodes of the Osasu Show and other programs that we have for you on www.tostvnetwork.com, where you can also find news and sustainable development and current affairs across Africa. You can follow us on social media at TOSTV Network, at Osasu Igbenadian, at The Osasu Show, on Instagram, Facebook, and other social media platforms. You can text us to keep in touch and prefer solutions, homegrown solutions, to the plethora of issues bewildering Nigerians at the local level. The number is on the screen. I'll see you same time, same place next week. Until then, keep wearing your mask, keep practicing social distancing, keep washing your hands, because COVID-19 is still very much out there. All right, take good care of yourself and God bless you.
There are certain moments in the day when I need my me time to just unwind and indulge.
What is this?
The Cadbury goodness is in every pack of Cadbury 3-in-1 hot chocolate, making you feel cheerful and pleasant. Enjoy the Cadbury goodness.